Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. If you'd like to help support this show and even get some extra episodes, then feel free to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin. You can get bonus stories on Kowabana's off weeks, and even early access to our videos on our YouTube channel. That's patreon.com/TaraADevlin. Every bit of support really helps. Thanks, guys. This week, we're looking at a wide variety of stories, both long and short, that have become legends in their own right over the years. They're perhaps not as famous as the likes of Hashaku-sama or Kisaragi Station, but many of them are still quite popular in Japan today. First up, we're getting on the train to head somewhere we shouldn't once again. Find out where in Tsukinomiya Station. I was dozing on the night train in Tokaido, and I woke up when it pulled into a station. I was in the window seat, and I think it was around 3 o'clock. The station kind of looked like Nagoya Station, but when I looked at the sign, it said Tsukinomiya. But the atmosphere was kind of strange. It was a little gloomy, like it wasn't real, although it wasn't especially scary. And looking closer, I saw several dark figures around 2 meters tall staggering around the platform. They were like 3-dimensional shadows. It's hard to describe, but I was like, what the hell? And then 2 people walked down the aisle between the seats and got off the train. The old man snoring in his sleep next to me was a regular person, and everyone else around us seemed normal too. As the train started moving and pulled away, I looked out at the city. It was fantastic, with a skyscraper the size of Tokyo Tower looming over the landscape. I saw it all too clearly for it to be a dream, and I remembered drinking tea as well, so I wondered what on earth had happened. Was it a dream that just seemed real, like sleep paralysis? Or what? Apparently, Tsukinomiya is well known in Tokushima, but this was different. It wasn't Nagoya. This next story serves as a warning to always be aware of your surroundings, particularly when you're in the water. You never know what's lurking out there. Find out why in Standing on the Seabed. This story happened to my great-grandfather, who worked as a fisherman in Awaji right after the Pacific War. He worked as a fisherman, but it was also his hobby in his free time. So one summer's day, he took his nephew out in a small boat after lunch to go fishing. The beach they went to was an area only locals were allowed to enter, and it was apparently a good spot to catch black sea bream, but on this day, they weren't able to catch anything at all. Eventually, his nephew got bored, so he took his clothes off and jumped into the water to swim around the boat. Kids these days, my great-grandfather thought, also taking a break. He looked out over the water and 10 or 20 meters away, he saw something standing on the seabed. As a bit of background information, it might seem unthinkable these days, but the Seto Inland Sea used to be quite clear back before all the factories and such were built. Even when my father was a kid, apparently you could see the bottom of the sea when taking the ferry from Akashi to Awaji. So, my great-grandfather, suspicious, looked closely, and it appeared that it was a person standing on the seabed. But they weren't just standing, they were slowly walking towards the boat. And looking even closer, it wasn't just one person, but several people walking in a line. He almost screamed, but then he remembered something his own grandfather had told him. If you see something strange in the ocean, you mustn't scream or kick up a fuss, and you must definitely not look it in the eyes. If you see something strange, you must act like you didn't see it at all." And so, he held back his scream. However, he wanted to get his nephew back in the boat as quickly as possible. "Hey, we're going home now," he said as calmly as possible to the boy swimming around the boat. But next thing he knew, one of those things was standing right beneath his nephew. It was quite close, so he could clearly see it. It was a young woman wearing work pants and an air raid hood, and she was looking right up at them both. He wanted to scream, but he held it in check. "Come on, quit dawdling," he said to his nephew instead. The woman continued walking until she was right beneath the boat and his nephew. And as his nephew was getting into the boat, the woman started to float up. Unable to look anymore, he turned away before he could stop himself. And as soon as his nephew was on board, he started the engine and immediately took off. "What happened?" his nephew asked, curious. "Nothing. I just don't feel well," he said. They returned safely to the harbour, and then he sent his nephew home alone. My great-grandfather was still so scared that his legs were trembling, and he couldn't get off the boat. When he finally calmed down and got off, he said he was drenched, like he'd been swimming in the sea. The creature in this next story is certainly a strange one, and most definitely not one you want to run into in the wild. Find out why in Hitokuchi. This is a friend's story. His grandfather was a hunter, and he apparently ran into a monster in the mountains known as Hitokuchi. It was a ferocious carnivore, able to swallow its prey in one gulp, hence the name. Other than its violent nature, it was intelligent and never fell for traps. When villagers started to die, however, they decided it was finally time to deal with Hitokuchi for good. After a large-scale hunt, they finally brought it down. They checked its corpse, and it looked like a strangely shaped Japanese wolf. It had short black hair, was the size of a buck, and had an abnormally large head. Terrifyingly, its jaw made up almost half its body length. Instead of taking it back to the village, they burnt the body on the spot, and then buried and salted the remains. People shouldn't venture deep into the mountains for no reason. You never know what scary things you might find there, his grandfather told him. In this next story, a child receives a powerful gift from a mystery friend, whose identity might be someone closer than they think. And this isn't a gift that should be wasted. Find out why in Mia-chan's Band-Aids. This is one of my memories. When I was in kindergarten, I fell over and scratched myself. I was crying when a girl from my class came over and gave me a Band-Aid. There were several in a metal box, around 5 or so. "You can have them all. Don't waste them," she said. "A Band-Aid? Did you hurt yourself?" my mother said when I got home, so I took it off to show her. But there was nothing there. It was strange, but I believed that it was because of the power of the Band-Aid. Several days later, I was eating breakfast when I noticed that my favorite teacup had a crack in it. In my childlike wisdom, I put a Band-Aid over the crack. At dinner that night, I took the Band-Aid off, and the crack was gone. Next was my toy wheelbarrow with a duck attached. The duck's head had broken off, so I put a band-aid on and what do you know? It was fixed. Right around the time I realized that these band-aids were precious and I had to use them well, our cat Yaya was hit by a car. I put the remaining band-aids on her, covered her in a towel and then skipped out on kindergarten to look after her. I was so tired from crying that I fell asleep. I woke up to Yaya licking my face. She was better. She didn't have a single scratch on her. When I went to kindergarten the next day, I had to thank Mia-chan. I had to tell her, "Thank you for the band-aids." When I got to kindergarten, I realized something. There was no girl by the name of Mia-chan. And I'd never seen that girl other than that one time she gave me the band-aids. But for some reason, when I saw her, I thought she was Mia-chan. Come to think of it, the cat that died shortly after giving birth to Yaya was called Mia. The creature in this next story lurks around an abandoned shrine, but if you happen to run into it, is there any hope of escape? Find out in Oregon-san. This happened nearly 20 years ago, when we returned to my mother's parents' home in the countryside of Fukuoka. She went back there every year for Obon, and my younger sister and I joined her. Our father was a navigation officer and spent this time on the other half of the planet. And so, we spent a week at our grandparents' house in Fukuoka. I was born in Yokohama, so I loved Fukuoka's blistering heat and the smell of all that greenery. I always went out with my cousin, who was 2 years older than me, to go fishing, swim in the river, and catch bugs and such too. One afternoon, my cousin said that he had something good to show me. He took me to a long-forgotten shrine about halfway up the mountain close to Grandpa's house. Behind the shrine were lots of dense trees, as well as 3 or 4 abandoned houses and an old well. The path leading to the houses was closed with rope, but my cousin stepped right over it and then continued down the path. I followed him. Despite being just past lunch, the area was only dimly lit, and the air was rather chilly. The houses were all rotten and falling down too. There was broken glass everywhere, the shutters were broken, and honestly, the place was kind of creepy. My cousin pulled me over to one, and then we went through a vent under the eaves. He then turned his torch on in the darkness and, with just that to rely on, we went further into the darkness. A short distance in, he showed me a pile of adult magazines. This was the good thing he wanted to show me. We lost track of time reading them, and next thing I knew, everything around us was even darker than before. And then, I heard someone walking around the house. "Someone's here," my cousin whispered. He then turned the torch off and plunged us into total darkness. And for sure, I could see someone walking around the house outside through the ventilation hole we crawled in through. Looking closer, the person was barefoot and seemed to be limping around the house. Then, I saw something glint by their side. It looked like a sword. I looked at my cousin like we were in grave danger, and he whispered, "Let's run." There were several vents that we could use to get in and out, and the person outside was walking around in a counterclockwise rotation. "Once they've gone past here, let's run from over there," my cousin said, approaching the vent we had come in through. We then held our breath and waited for the legs to pass by. Shortly after they did, my cousin left and I followed. But in my haste to get out, my head and arms got stuck in the vent and I couldn't move. Fearing I would be killed if the person walking around found me, I wriggled and writhed, my heart pounding, until I finally got out of the small vent. I sensed someone behind me, so I turned around and saw a face with wide eyes glaring at me from the vent. It seemed the person walking around outside realized where we were and entered through a different vent to chase us. The face staring at me from the vent almost looked like a samurai with his top knot undone. His mouth was open as he stared at us with wide eyes, streams of blood dripping from them. I stood there frozen, unable to move from his stare, but then the samurai's head and arms popped out of the vent, reaching for us. "Quickly!" my cousin screamed. He grabbed my hand and then took off just like a rabbit. Behind us, we could hear the sound of something dragging along the ground, but my cousin continued running down the dense and dim mountain path while dragging me behind him. I remember we tripped badly once on our way down, leading to my cousin's jaw and my knee bleeding. My cousin was holding a few of those adult magazines in one hand, and he dropped several, but picked up a few before continuing. We continued panicking down the mountain, and once we reached our grandfather's house, my cousin and I screamed for him from the veranda. He was watching sumo on TV inside. As he listened to us, he seemed to understand what was going on. "Hey, Grandma, bring the salt and sake," he said to our grandmother inside. "Looks like Oregon-san found them." Grandma was cooking in the kitchen, but she rushed over with a bottle of sake and a pot full of salt. Then Grandpa told my cousin to go into the house to get the clippers, and told me to get undressed. I did as I was told, and then he shaved my head with the clippers my cousin brought. He then put the sake in his mouth and spat it on my face before wiping it off with a cloth. After that, he poured water over my head, and then Grandma sprinkled salt all over me. She then took my clothes, my hair, and the magazines my cousin had brought back, and burnt them all in an incinerator inside the house. "All right, all good now. Your mother took your sister to Fukuoka City, so that's enough for today. Time for bed," our grandparents said. I wasn't so much scared as I was afraid that I'd done something terrible. Would my mother get angry at me? I couldn't stop thinking about it, but I did as I was told and got into the bed my grandmother laid out for me. The next morning I was woken up early, and Mum said that she was going to take us back to Yokohama ahead of schedule. I was terrified that she was going to ask about the shrine, and she seemed to know what was going on, but in the end, she didn't say anything to me either way. But for the next few days, until the summer holidays ended, I had a terrible ringing in my ears. Other than that, I was fine though, and by the end of the holidays, the ringing stopped. But when I started the new school term, all my classmates laughed at me for being bald. If your taxi driver insists on taking you a different route at night, and even offers you a discount for it, perhaps you should take him up on that offer. Find out why in Through the Mountains. My colleague told me this story. He had a long day at work one day, and it was late at night by the time he left. He called his usual taxi driver to pick him up, but on the way home, the driver said something strange. "Do you mind if I take a route other than this one through the mountains?" This would take them quite the long way around, so at first he refused. "I'll charge you the same as always. No, I'll even give you a discount. Please." Naturally, this made him curious, and he asked why. The driver mentioned there was a pass on the mountain route, but he really didn't want to use it late at night. "Whether I have a passenger or not, I just don't want to go there," he said, and then fell silent. The driver wouldn't say any more than that, and so, in the end, they took the long way home, for a discount. I personally found this next one quite interesting, because the punchline relies on having some knowledge of Dutch, which I also speak a little of. Dutch friends, can you catch what's going on here? Find out in De Dood en Koolmensaan. Speaking of the Netherlands, there's this story passed down where I live. It's De Dood en Koolmensaan. Long ago during the Edo period, there was an Oni or something that appeared in our village. He was large and red and wore strange clothes, and he kept repeating, "De Dood en Komen, De Dood en Komen." That's why they called him that. At any rate, the village headman hid him away in a storehouse because, apparently, the Oni, De Dood en Koolmensaan, was always trembling in fear at something. In the end, his friends came across the seas and took the scaredy cat De Dood en Koolmensaan back with them. So, that's the story, but I wonder if it's about a Dutchman who escaped from Dejima during the time Japan was closed to the rest of the world. Crap. No way. I'm shaking right now. I put De Dood en Komen into Google Translate from Dutch to Japanese. It means, the dead are coming. Were those who came from over the sea to take him back really his friends? When an important piece of construction equipment oddly goes missing during a typhoon, a man who lives next door heads out to investigate. But is he going to like what he finds out there? Considering we're sharing this tale, probably not. Find out why in Location of the Excavator. This happened about a month ago. I live in Kyoto, but I'm a 26-year-old who has never seen anything strange or supernatural. Anyway, they were building a new house next to my apartment building and laying foundations for it at the time. But then, 1 month ago or so, Typhoon 6 hit Shikoku, right? Because of that typhoon, there were sudden strong winds and rain, and overall, annoying weather here in Kyoto too. I work as a construction worker, so that meant I had time off. And because I'm a construction worker, I go to work in my work clothes in the morning, so the guys working next door quickly became friends with me. We'd chat about how our respective jobs were going, how the economy was going to hell, etc. At the pace the typhoon was approaching, it was definitely going to pass through the Kansai area, so I was just kicking back after the boss told us that the next day would be a day off. During the night, I was playing games on my PSP and then stopped to go on the veranda for a cigarette. I always smoked outside so I didn't dirty the walls of the apartment, but it was quite windy and I was wondering if the construction site next door was okay. Anyway, I took a quick walk over there and it seemed they had taken back anything that shouldn't get wet, but they left a lot of the construction equipment and tools out. Well, it won't be very good if these get wet, I thought, but then I noticed something strange. The excavator that was always there was gone. I say excavator, but really it was more like a small digger. Regular folks probably wouldn't understand what was so strange, but you can put excavators on top of a vinyl sheet to act as a heavy weight, so it was weird that they left all this other equipment behind, but the excavator was gone. That's odd, I thought, and the very next moment, the loud winds stopped. And in the distance, I could hear the unique sounds of an excavator moving. Hey, it's 2 a.m. What the hell? I thought. And then another thought crossed my mind. A thief? I made my way towards the sound, wondering if I should alert the police. The strong winds picked up again, but I could still hear the engine, and in my mind, I wondered if I might get a small reward for catching the thief. On the way over, I realized something impossible. If you were going to steal an excavator, then normally you wouldn't be stupid enough to ride around slowly in it. And in order to put it on a truck, you'd have to move the cargo ladder. Plus, the direction the sounds were coming from was the mountain just ahead. It wasn't like it would be impossible for it to move, but it was still an unpaved mountain path. I stopped for a moment, something feeling not quite right, but I was also curious, so I pushed on, and as I turned a corner, I saw the excavator starting up the mountain. I knew what was ahead. That path continued up the mountain, but it ended halfway up, and past that was... At that moment, a bad feeling washed over me, but I had come this far already. I stood at the head of the path to look for the excavator I'd briefly lost sight of, but visibility was good, so I was able to see it up ahead. It was moving, and from the rear, I could see someone driving it. Yet the moment I saw it, a chill ran down my spine. I'm a construction worker, so I've ridden an excavator before. That's no doubt why I recognized the strangeness of the guy sitting in the driver's seat. Excavators move on rollers, so they can, in general, move anywhere. But when you're on something uneven and rough, like a mountain, the excavator shakes, just like the one ahead of me. Now, the person in the driver's seat in such a situation would try to brace themselves so they don't lose balance. But the guy riding the excavator about 20 meters ahead of me was just sitting there with his head bobbling, like a baby, or a marionette with its strings cut, or like a corpse that didn't care one bit about all the shaking. The driver's head simply bobbled without a care in the world as the excavator shook, and even if you'd never driven one before, there was no way a person would move like that. Not to mention that an excavator was driving through the mountains in the middle of the night during a typhoon. For the first time in my life, a chill ran down my spine and then spread out through my entire body, and my instinct screamed at me to get away from this place as quickly as possible. I didn't know why, but whatever was going on, it wasn't good. I ran back to my apartment. I looked back only once, when I could just barely see the mountain behind me, and I could still see the excavator's headlights moving up the path. The next morning, it was getting bright outside, but the winds were still strong. Usually, I'd be heading to work at this time, but because we didn't have any work, I was just at home. I still felt a little sleepy, but I knew that what I saw wasn't a dream. At any rate, I went outside to smoke, and then I heard voices coming from the construction site next door. They were all yelling about something. Simply put, they were talking about the missing excavator. Because the weather was so bad, they were collecting their tools, but because the excavator was gone, they were arguing over who last had the key. Several people had seen it in the shed the day before, but for some reason, it had now disappeared. Either way, they were debating whether to call the police, at the risk of making the company angry, or splitting up to find the culprit when I stepped outside. "Hey, do you know anything about what happened to the excavator?" they asked. Thinking about what happened the day before, I said, "I don't know, but I'll help you look." Including me, 6 guys set out to look for it. I made my way towards the mountain. I had a bad feeling, but there was something I wanted to check. The path leading to the mountain wasn't paved, so there should be marks in the dirt from the rollers. And, because it was muddy, there they were, clear as day. I returned to the guys and told them I just happened to find some tracks. They all decided to head over to the mountain, and so I joined them. It was bright, and I was there with another 5 people, so I felt safe. We followed the tracks, turned the corner, and then proceeded up the mountain. That path ended in a dead end halfway up, and there was an open space there, plus an old temple of some kind. We immediately found the excavator in the open area, and of course, nobody was in it. But there were 2 things that caught my attention. First, the end of the excavator arm was pointed, but it was stuck in the ground, with like 4 or 5 bits of cloth also poking out. "What the hell is that?" one of the guys said, spreading it out. It was a t-shirt, but what made it different to a normal t-shirt was the photo printed on it. There was a couple, American, maybe, and it was like their faces were being pushed out of the arms, as though it had been done that way deliberately. The second thing was another shirt nailed to the temple. The excavator arm was pushing down on the other shirt, so I couldn't make out their faces, but on this one, I could tell they were definitely a foreign couple. And beneath their faces, something had been written with spray paint. "Unforgive." One of the guys seemed to grasp the meaning and, realizing how strange it was, quickly left. Of course, we threw the shirts away. But in the end, they had found the excavator, and it would be a liability issue if anyone found out it went missing, so they decided to keep it a secret. They also gave me 3,000 yen for my help. Sorry there's not much more to it. Maybe you guys in this thread will understand. What on earth did I see that night? Was it a curse? The hour of the ox ritual? Maybe you don't believe me, but it's a true story. If it was a curse, well, Kifune Shrine is in Kyoto, but not there. It's about a 30-minute drive away, so I don't think it has anything to do with that. The teacher in this next story seems to have ulterior motives for many of her actions. But who actually is she, and what does she want? And what is this strange song she keeps making her students sing? Find out in Pledge of Light. I heard this story from the local psychic lady during our summer festival. She heard this story from a woman who came to see her that apparently happened when she was in kindergarten. When I was in kindergarten, I remember singing a song called Pledge of Light. But now that I've grown up, I don't remember what type of song it was. It's not in my book of songs from kindergarten that I've kept all this time, and when I look it up on the internet, I can't find any nursery rhymes or anything with the same name either. I checked a few songs with similar names, but none of them had the same melody. I was in the tulip class, and it was Yu Sensei who taught us the song. It was very popular in our class, but I didn't like it very much because it felt scary. I can't really put how into words, but I didn't like the difficult lyrics and the dark melody. Also, there was one experience that bothered me. When the tulip class went to the forest for an excursion one day, Yu Sensei suddenly said, "Okay, everyone, we're going to have a little adventure at the shrine now." I was holding a doll made of straw that she helped us make. Everyone in the class was. Come to think of it, I think Yu Sensei was the only grown-up with us at the time, and the album I have at home doesn't mention anything of this trip either. We arrived at the shrine, but then Yu Sensei kept going further in the trees behind it. We were just kindergarten kids, so we were pretty tired. Eventually, we reached an area with 3 pitch-black trees. Yu Sensei took a nail and hammer out of her bag. "Everyone, let's stick our dolls to the trees," she said. And with her help, we nailed our straw dolls to the black trees. After that, we all sang Pledge of Light. Some kids cried as they sang, and others closed their eyes tightly, like they were scared of something. There also seemed to be a creepy voice mixed in with the singing, like someone was chanting, but being played in reverse. When we left the forest, the sun was already setting. She gathered all us kids at the park by the shrine and then said, "Okay, it's playtime now." For a short while we played hide and seek, and then we returned to the school. The next day, several kids from Tulip class missed school because of a fever and injuries and such. I was one of them. When I returned to school a few days later after my fever was finally gone, I found Yu Sensei wasn't there. "Where's Yu Sensei?" I asked one of my friends. "Dunno," they said. "She quit," said others. And some kids said they didn't even know who Yu Sensei was. Did she really quit? I didn't hear about any party to say goodbye to her, and there was no photo of her in the album either. Looking back on it now, I don't think that was a normal excursion. And when I asked the other teachers, "Where did Yu Sensei go?" they just gave me strange looks. Before long, it became forbidden to even talk about her at school. But that's natural, right? You see, Yu Sensei's name was Ude Chigiri, to tear one's arms off. No matter how you look at it, that's not a human name, right? Finally this week, a tale of greed and how it corrupts and destroys all around us. Even the land that never forgets. Find out why in Tamematsu's Bamboo Grove. Long ago, there used to be a place called Tamematsu's Bamboo Grove at the foot of the mountain near where we lived. As you might expect from the name, it apparently used to be a literal bamboo grove. But after the war, it was turned into a residential area, so only the elderly knew about it. Before it was a bamboo grove, sometime during the Meiji or Taisho eras, a man by the name of Tamematsu lived there in his mansion. Tamematsu-san was a blind musician who was an expert at the shamisen and the shakuhachi. He was blind, and he came from a poor family as well. But after hardship, and even more hardship, he finally became a musician. Yet, Tamematsu was a witty, kind, and stylish man that belied his difficult past. He also had a son who wasn't very talented at music, but was good at business. His son started his own successful business, and then he built a mansion for his father at the foot of the mountain, so that he could live an easy life. His son lived in town, while Tamematsu-san lived alone in the mansion with some servants. And, in this way, he should have been able to live the rest of his life in peace, while teaching people how to play the shamisen. However, when his son was in his 40s, he brought his young wife to the mansion. She was a hard worker and always took care of the blind Tamematsu-san herself, rather than leaving it up to the servants. Before long, he also started to think of his son's devoted wife as his own daughter. Her parents had both died when she was young, and she was all alone in the world. Perhaps because of his own hardships, he sympathized with her, and in time, he officially adopted her as his own daughter. Perhaps you can already see where this is going, but in reality, the woman was a terrifying woman who had her sights set on his money. Whether it was a coincidence or something that was always meant to happen, before long, Tamematsu-san's son died in an accident. He fell from a building, although nobody was quite sure how it happened. The woman soon sold her husband's company and then fired all of the servants in the mansion, claiming they were a waste of money. She then sold everything in the house that she possibly could, including Tamematsu-san's beloved shamisen and shakuhachi, and even his dead wife's kimono. Tamematsu-san's heart hurt so much that he became bedridden. He was blind with no servants, and his son's wife turned her back on him and stopped caring for him too. He was left in the back room with barely any food, and soon began to waste away. And although he was bedridden, nobody washed or cared for him, so it wasn't long until the room was full of the stench of human waste. When he couldn't bear his hunger anymore and called out to his son's wife, she simply got angry at him. "You stink! Hurry up and die already!" And when neighbours and friends visited the house, the son's wife turned them away with lies. "He's too weak to see anyone right now," she said. 6 months after his son's death, Tamematsu-san passed away as well. The bed sores on his back had begun to decay, and this left a stain on the tatami mats beneath his bed. He died clawing at his own throat from hunger and thirst, withering away on the bed. With his eyes and mouth wide open, he died looking just like an oni. There was no trace of the gentle man he was when still alive and healthy. Once she took control of his assets and property, the son's wife renovated the floor and walls that Tamematsu-san had died in. But for some reason, no matter how many times she changed them, mold continued to grow. And strangely, the mold always formed on that one spot where Tamematsu-san died. The woman grew increasingly more frightened, and over time, she became more mentally unstable, emaciated, and then finally admitted to a hospital. There she developed a high fever, and then died. Before she died, she kept repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry," over and over. And then, a few days later, she was found dead, clawing at her own throat, with her eyes wide open, just like Tamematsu-san. Shortly after that, Tamematsu-san's house was torn down, and bamboo grew in its stead. There were rumors that a strange wind blew through the area that sounded just like a shakuhachi being played. The bamboo grove was dark and damp, and people often found the carcasses of small birds, dogs, and cats there. It was also said that people who ate the bamboo shoots that grew there also died with a high fever. Never eat bamboo shoots or mushrooms taken from Tamematsu's bamboo grove. Children must never enter the bamboo grove. Apparently, when my grandfather was a child, his parents often said this to him. After the war, that bamboo grove was turned into a residential area, and now an apartment building stands there. Thanks to the war and various disasters that happened after that, all of the old residents have disappeared, and nobody knows about the old bamboo grove. Even I had completely forgotten about the story that my grandfather, who has since passed away, told me long ago. That is, until my niece, who has just started going to elementary school, told me a strange story. Mika-chan said they can't keep rabbits at her place. They always die really quickly, so that's why they're not allowed. And that's the end of the story. Our family are distant relatives of Tamematsu-san, and I heard this story just briefly from my grandfather, which was why I forgot about it. It wasn't us who spoke to the people living in that apartment building, so I don't know where they heard it from, but apparently there have been some issues over there, and some people have even started moving out. A huge thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Christina, Just Sawn, and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 13, out on Amazon right now, and check out our merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana. True Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.